we present a special Christmas story called The Gift of the Magi by O. Henry. Here is Shep O'Neill with the story.
$1.87, that was all, and 60 cents of it in the smallest pieces of money, pennies. Pennies saved 1 and 2 at a time by negotiating with the men at the market who sold vegetables and meat, negotiating until one's face burned with the silent knowledge of being poor. 3 times Della counted it, $1.87. And the next day would be Christmas. There was clearly nothing to do but sit down and cry, so Della cried, which led to the thought that life is made up of little cries and smiles, with more little cries than smiles. Della finished her crying and dried her face. She stood by the window and looked out, unhappily, at a gray cat walking along a gray fence in a gray backyard. Tomorrow would be Christmas Day, and she had only $1.87 to buy her husband Jim a gift. She had been saving every penny she could for months, with this result. Jim earned $20 a week, which does not go far. Expenses had been greater than she had expected. They always are. Many a happy hour she had spent planning to buy something nice for him, something fine and rare, something close to being worthy of the honor of belonging to Jim. There was a tall glass mirror between the windows of the room. Suddenly Della turned from the window and stood before the glass mirror and looked at herself. Her eyes were shining, but her face had lost its color within 20 seconds. Quickly she pulled down her hair and let it fall to its full length. Now, Mr. and Mrs. James Dillingham Young had 2 possessions which they valued. One was Jim's gold timepiece, the watch that had been his father's and his grandfather's. The other was Della's hair. Had the Queen of Sheba lived in their building, Della would have let her hair hang out the window to dry, just to reduce the value of the Queen's jewels. So now Della's beautiful hair fell about her, shining like a brown waterfall. It reached below her knees and made itself almost like a covering for her. And then quickly she put it up again. She stood still while a few tears fell on the floor. She put on her coat and her old brown hat. With a quick motion and brightness still in her eyes, she danced out the door and down the street. Where she stopped, the sign read, Madame Sophronia, hair goods of all kinds. Della ran up the steps to the shop, out of breath. "Will you buy my hair?" asked Della. "I buy hair," said Madame. "Take your hat off, and let us have a look at it." Down came the beautiful brown waterfall of hair. $20, said Madame, lifting the hair with an experienced hand. "Give it to me quick," said Della. The next 2 hours went by as if they had wings. Della looked in all the stores to choose a gift for Jim. She found it at last. It surely had been made for Jim and no one else. It was a chain, simple round rings of silver. It was perfect for Jim's gold watch. As soon as she saw it, she knew that it must be for him. It was like him, quiet, and with great value. She gave the shopkeeper $21, and she hurried home with the 87 cents that was left. When Della arrived home, she began to repair what was left of her hair. The hair had been ruined by her love and her desire to give a special gift. Repairing the damage was a very big job. Within 40 minutes, her head was covered with tiny round curls of hair that made her look wonderfully like a schoolboy. She looked at herself in the glass mirror long and carefully. "If Jim does not kill me before he takes a second look at me," she said to herself, "he'll say I look like a song girl. But what could I do? Oh, what could I do with $1.87? At 7 o'clock that night, the coffee was made, and the pan on the back of the stove was hot and ready to cook the meat. Jim was never late coming home from work. Della held the silver chain in her hand and sat near the door. Then she heard his step, and she turned white for just a minute. She had a way of saying a little silent prayer about the simplest everyday things. And now she whispered, "Please, God, make him think I am still pretty." The door opened and Jim stepped in. He looked thin and very serious. Poor man, he was only 22, and he had to care for a wife. He needed a new coat and gloves to keep his hands warm. Jim stopped inside the door, as immovable as a dog smelling a bird. His eyes were fixed upon Della. There was an expression in them that she could not read, and it frightened her. It was not anger, nor surprise, nor fear, nor any of the feelings that she had been prepared for. He simply looked at her, with a strange expression on his face. Della went to him. "Jim, my love," she cried, "do not look at me that way. I had my hair cut and sold because I could not have lived through Christmas without giving you a gift. My hair will grow out again. I just had to do it. My hair grows very fast. Say Merry Christmas, Jim, and let us be happy. You do not know what a beautiful, nice gift I have for you." "You have cut off your hair?" asked Jim, slowly, as if he had not accepted the information, even after his mind worked very hard. "Cut it off and sold it," said Della. "Do you not like me just as well? I am the same person without my hair, right?" Jim looked about the room as if he were looking for something. "You say your hair is gone?" he asked. "You need not look for it," said Della. "It is sold, I tell you, sold and gone too. It is Christmas Eve, boy. Be good to me, for it was cut for you. Maybe the hairs of my head were numbered," she went on with sudden serious sweetness, "but nobody could ever count my love for you. Shall I put the meat on, Jim?" Jim seemed to awaken quickly and put his arms around Della. Then he took a package from his coat and threw it on the table. "Do not make any mistake about me, Dell," he said. I do not think there is any haircut that could make me like my girl any less. But if you will open that package, you may see why you had me frightened at first." White fingers quickly tore at the string and paper. There was a scream of joy, and then, alas, a change to tears and cries, requiring the man of the house to use all his skill to calm his wife. For there were the combs, the special set of objects to hold her hair that Della had wanted ever since she saw them in a shop window. Beautiful combs made of shells, with jewels at the edge, just the color to wear in the beautiful hair that was no longer hers. They cost a lot of money, she knew, and her heart had wanted them without ever hoping to have them. And now the beautiful combs were hers, but the hair that should have touched them was gone. But she held the combs to herself, and soon she was able to look up with a smile and say, "My hair grows so fast, Jim." Then Della jumped up like a little burned cat and cried, "Oh, oh!" Jim had not yet seen his beautiful gift. She happily held it out to him in her open hands. The silver chain seemed so bright. "Isn't it wonderful, Jim? I looked all over town to find it. You will have to look at the time 100 times a day now. Give me your watch. I want to see how it looks on it." Instead of obeying, Jim fell on the couch and put his hands under the back of his head and smiled. "Dell," said he, "let us put our Christmas gifts away and keep them a while. They are too nice to use just right now. I sold my gold watch to get the money to buy the set of combs for your hair. And now, why not put the meat on?" The Magi were wise men, wonderfully wise men, who brought gifts to the baby Jesus. They invented the art of giving Christmas gifts. Being wise, their gifts were wise ones. And here I have told you the story of two young people who most unwisely gave for each other the greatest treasures of their house. But in a last word to the wise of these days, let it be said that of all who give gifts, these two were the wisest. Everywhere they are wisest. They are the Magi.
You have heard the American story, The Gift of the Magi. This story was written by O. Henry and adapted into special English by Karen Leggett. Your storyteller was Shep O'Neill.
Our story this week is called The God of His Fathers. It was written by Jack London in the year 1901. Here is Shep O'Neill with the story.
Silently, the wolves circled the herd of caribou deer. Gray bellies close to the ground, the wolves in the pack surrounded a pregnant deer. They pulled her down and tore out her throat. The rest of the caribou herd raced off in 100 directions. The wolves began to feed. Once again, the Alaska Territory was the scene of silent death. Here, in its ancient forests, the strong had killed the weak for thousands and thousands of years. Small groups of Indians also lived in this land at the rainbow's end, but their Stone Age life was ending. Strange men with blond hair and blue eyes had discovered the lands of the north. The Indian chiefs ordered their warriors to fight them. Stone arrow met steel bullet. The Indians could not stop the strangers. The white men conquered the icy rivers in light canoes. They broke through the dark forests and climbed the Rocky Mountains. One of these men sat in front of a tent near a river. His name was Hay Stockard. Over the smoke and flames of his fire, he watched an Indian village not far from his own camp. From inside his tent came the cry of a sick child and the gentle answering song of its mother. But the man was not concerned now with them. He was thinking of Baptiste the Red, the chief of the Indian village, who had just left him. "We do not want you here," Baptiste had told him. "If we permit you to sit by our fires, after you will come your church, your priests, and your God." Baptiste the Red hated the white man's God. His father had been an Englishman, his mother the daughter of an Indian chief. Baptiste had been raised among white men. When Baptiste was a young man, he fell in love with a Frenchman's daughter, but her father opposed the marriage. A Christian priest refused to marry them. So Baptiste took the girl into the forests. They went to live among his mother's people. A year later, the girl died while giving birth to her first child. Baptiste took the baby back to live among the white people. For many years he lived in peace with them as his daughter grew up tall and beautiful. One night, while Baptiste was away, a white man broke into their home and killed the girl. When Baptiste asked for justice, he was told the white man's God forgives all sins. So Baptiste killed his daughter's murderer with his own hands and returned forever to his mother's people. "I have sworn to make any white man who comes to my village deny his God if he wants to live," he told Hay Stockard. "But since you are the first, I will not do this if you go, and go quickly." "And if I stay?" Hay Stockard had asked quietly as he filled his pipe. "Then soon you will meet your God, your bad God, the God of the white man." The Indian chief rose to his feet and left Hay Stockard's camp to return to his village. The next morning, Hay Stockard watched with angry eyes as 3 men in a long canoe came to the river bank. 2 of the men were Indian. The third, a white man, wore a bright red cloth around his head. Hay Stockard reached for his gun and then changed his mind. As soon as the canoe landed, the white man jumped out and ran up to Stockard. "So we meet again, Hay Stockard. Peace be with you. I know you are a sinner, but I, Sturgis Owen, am God's own servant. I will bring you back to our church." "Listen to me," Stockard warned. "If you stay here, you'll bring trouble to yourself and your men. You'll all be killed, and so will my wife, my child, and myself." Owen looked up to the sky. "The man who carries God in his heart and the Bible in his hand is protected." Later that morning, the Indian chief Baptiste came back to Stockard's camp. "Give me the priest," Baptiste demanded, "and I will let you go in peace. If you do not, you die." Sturgis Owen grabbed his Bible. "I am not afraid," he said. "God will protect me and hold me in his right hand. I am ready to go with Baptiste to his village. I will save his soul for God." Hay Stockard shook his head. "Listen to me, Baptiste. I did not bring this priest here, but now that he is here, I can't let you kill him. Many of your people will die if we fight each other." Baptiste looked into Stockard's eyes. "But those who live," he said, "will not have the words of a strange god in their ears." After a moment of silence, Baptiste the Red turned and went back to his own camp. Sturgis Owen called his 2 men to him, and the 3 of them kneeled to pray. Stockard and his wife began to prepare the camp for battle. As they worked, they heard the sound of war drums in the village. As Sturgis Owen waited and prayed, he began to feel his religious fever cooling. Fear replaced hope in his heart. The love of life took the place of the love of God in his mind. The love of life. He could not stop himself from feeling it. Owen knew that Stockard also loved his life, but Stockard would choose death rather than shame. The war drums boomed loudly. Suddenly, they stopped. A flood of dark feet raced toward Stockard's camp. Arrows whistled through the air. A spear went through the body of Stockard's wife. Stockard's bullets answered back. Wave after wave of Indian warriors broke over the barrier. Sturgis Owen ran into his tent. His 2 men died quickly. Hay Stockard alone remained on his feet, knocking the attacking Indians aside. Stockard held an axe in one hand and his gun in the other. Behind him, a hand grabbed Stockard's baby by its tiny leg and pulled it from under his mother's body. The Indian whipped the child through the air, smashing its head against a log. Stockard turned and cut off the Indian's head with his axe. The circle of angry faces closed on Stockard. 2 times they pushed up to him, but each time he beat them back. They fell under his feet as the ground became wet with blood. Finally, Baptiste called his men to him. "Stockard," he shouted, You are a brave man. Deny your God, and I will let you live." 2 Indians dragged Sturgis Owen out of the tent. He was not hurt, but his eyes were wild with fear. He felt anger at God for making him so weak. Why had God given him faith without strength? Owen stood shaking before Baptiste the Red. "Where is your God now?" demanded the Indian chief. "I do not know," Owen whispered. "Do you have a God?" "I had." "And now?" "No." "Very good," Baptiste said. "See that this man goes free. Let nothing happen to him, and send him back to his own people so he can tell his priests about Baptiste the Red's land where there is no God." Baptiste turned to Hay Stockard. "There is no God," Baptiste said. Stockard laughed. One of the young Indian warriors lifted the war spear. "Do you have a God?" Baptiste shouted. Stockard took a deep breath. "Yes," he said, "the God of my fathers." The spear flew through the air and went deep into Stockard's chest. Sturgis Owen saw Stockard fall slowly to the ground. Then the Indians put Owen in a canoe. Sturgis Owen went down the river to carry the message of Baptiste the Red, in whose country there was no God.
You have just heard the story, The God of His Fathers. It was written by Jack London and adapted for Special English by Donna DeSanctis. Your narrator was Shep O'Neill.